they realized that, you know, the first time around, they beat people down, they lynched people until they could do that no more, and the people demanded they stop it. Now they've realized that if they go in and hide behind a clipboard and a suit and a technician in a private corporation, that they can go back to disenfranchising poor and minorities.
There was a recent commission that was put together headed by James A. Baker and Jimmy Carter. This commission came out and recommended photo IDs at the polls, requiring folks to have photo ID. Now, it sounds sensible enough until you take a look at it and you discover that anywhere from 10 to 20 million American voters don't have a driver's license, don't have photo IDs. And what do you know? They happen to be largely minorities, city dwellers, the elderly, the poor. Look, voter fraud is not a problem in this country. Election fraud is a huge problem. Voter fraud, you know, is something that the bad guys like to put out there as if it's a problem. In fact, for example, the League of Women's Voters did a study of the last two national elections in Ohio and found that of over 9 million votes cast, there was exactly 4 cases of voter fraud that was discovered. It's not the people. It's the voting machine companies who are running these elections with secret software, who are privatizing it. It's the congressmen and the senators and the state officials who are allowing them to do so.
There's nothing quite so hot as a Georgia summer. But guess what? The Diebold machines break down in the heat. Now, I wonder if our illustrious Secretary of State, Kathy Cox, who wants to be the next governor of Georgia, first woman governor of Georgia, asked the question, how do the machines perform in the heat? If she had just asked that simple question, we would have had an alternative to the Diebold machines. But then by that time, of course, she had already allowed Diebold to place her photograph and the seal of the state of Georgia on their promotional materials. So she had become wedded to this particular system, which I think kind of is a conflict of interest.
I'll say elections were stolen. In fact, I did.
You think the election was stolen?
Absolutely.
In 2004?
Look at the exit polls and they don't match the results. The same thing that we complained about when the Ukraine had their election,
right,
and actually made them have a new one.
Right.
Their exit polls were actually closer than ours.
In fact, in the states that had electronic voting, the numbers didn't match at all with the exit polling. But in states where they had paper, what do you know? The exit polls and the final results were almost perfect.
I have no doubt John Kerry won the election in Ohio.
Okay. Now, had John Kerry won the election in Ohio, John Kerry would be the president.
Sure. To say that those exit polls were so far off just didn't happen. Something else happened. And I say that as someone who has a PhD in political science and has worked in campaigns. People who came out and thought they voted for Kerry, their votes weren't counted,
right,
or somebody actually tampered with the vote count.
So the Yang folks,
right,
Feeney and the are sort of harassing Mavis?
Are getting DOT to harass Mavis because Nelson Hill, who works for DOT, is also Feeney's puppy. When they were harassing her, I wrote back to the head IG, Cecil Bragg, and said, you're not doing anything on the investigation, you know, why not? And the next business day, their response was they fired me and Mavis at the same time.
Clint is fired at 10 in the morning. I'm fired at like 2:30 that afternoon.
Instead of investigating this company, instead of putting the brakes on what's going on, they're actually writing letters of recommendation for that company,
correct,
Yang,
correct,
and saying that you're removed.
Correct.
Tom Feeney's fingerprints are all over this thing?
Yes, yes.
Literal fingerprints.
Literal fingerprints. I mean, read the public record. Read the public record. I don't want anyone to take my word for anything, Brad. Get the documents and read the record. And when you read a memo from Nelson Hill's secretary to him stating that Mr. Feeney wants this letter signed today, and this letter is a recommendation for Yang Enterprises, and the following day, after Mr. Hill executes this letter of recommendation, he is suddenly promoted to deputy CIO for the State Technology Office.
Nelson Hill is promoted the
Yes.
day after he writes this letter.
The letter of recommendation for Yang Enterprises.
Had they had any problems with you prior to this investigation?
I believe in January of 2001, I received an outstanding evaluation that went into a lot of detail as to the value of my services to the department.
And how long had you been with the department?
I began with the department in 88.
88?
Yes.
So
I'd been with the department for...
Almost 15 years
yes.
at this point.
Yes. The department did an agency cleansing of any corporate knowledge concerning the problems with the Yang contract.
How many people were fired?
A half dozen other than Clint and myself.
So anybody who was involved with the Yang contract is now
Correct.
gone?
Correct.
In fact, on her, they tried to get her to sign a little paper saying she resigned.
Did she sign it?
She signed the resign one, and she kept the one where it said you're fired. So when it went to court, when they said, well, she resigned voluntarily, we didn't do anything about it, she could produce a paper showing that they're just flat out lying.
She filed a whistleblower suit.
Yes.
And she won the case.
She won the case.
What I began to do was to look into all the pieces of Clint Curtis's story, all the claims that he's made, and the more you look, the more paper trail there is that backs up Clint Curtis's assertions.
In 2004, the Florida Department of Transportation's audit of Yang Enterprises found $850,000 in questioned and qualified costs. Of that amount, Yang was asked to repay $132,000 pending further investigation. Hello, Phoenix. We've got a huge show for you today. Diebold whistleblower Stephen Heller, in his first live broadcast interview. Stephen Heller was charged with 3 felony counts for releasing secret Diebold legal documents that he came across while he was working as a temp at Diebold's Los Angeles law firm, Jones Day.
I believed in my heart, even though I hadn't quite admitted it to myself, as soon as I saw them, those documents, I think I knew I was going to eventually release them.
You can't really talk about what those documents were that you printed out, right?
That's true, Brad. Those documents were attorney-client privilege information, and that's why I got arrested in the first place. And even now, if I were to talk about the content, I could be at risk of getting myself in trouble again.
All right. Can I talk about the content?
You can say anything you want.
I will.
All right.
Diebold was asking legal advice about having secretly installed uncertified software on voting machines to be used in the 2004 California election. It was a clear violation of the law.
No one in America in the press was covering this issue. So I thought if I send all these documents to some reporter who doesn't know anything about the issue, they're likely to end up in the trash can. I knew I had to get them to somebody who had the press connections and the government connections to do something with these documents, and that obviously was Bev Harris of Black Box Voting.
I started reading the leaked Diebold memos, which have been around everywhere on the internet. But at a certain point of time, I realized it has to live in a memory card. I knew already that it's against the FEC rules. It should not be there. And I say, well, that would be a problem because this memory card is proprietary. I said, well, no, it's not. I have seen this guy before. And he actually went on immediately and wrote to Diebold and got in written response saying, this memory card is proprietary technology by Diebold. It's not available from anywhere else. So
Diebold told them in a letter that this was
I
proprietary.
actually saw the letter. So I said, no. I have almost photographic memory. I know I have seen this guy before. Actually, it took me 2 weeks to figure out what the memory card was. And then it all of a sudden clicked. It's the Tandy old machine. The original first patent ever made about a laptop computer.
By Tandy?
Tandy. And this is the memory unit. It's an Epson memory card. That's from the patent I got the name, Epson memory card. Now I know who you are. So after I knew what it is, I spent $130. I got the reader.
Because of its design, the Diebold touchscreen machine proved vulnerable to a 20-year-old hack, the old bootloader hack.
There's nothing worse than bootloader hack. And honestly, I haven't seen these kind of things to happen in 20 years.
This you can do. You've confirmed this,
This is
on the Diebold
this is
touchscreen
confirmed.
TSX machine.
This is confirmed by me, and proof of concept was written by Princeton University, so you have independent verification for my finding.
In 2006, a Princeton University professor and 2 graduate students confirmed what Harry Hursty had already proven. They posted their demonstration on YouTube, hacking the Diebold touchscreen machine in less than 1 minute's time. They inserted a vote-flipping virus that changed vote tallies, would spread to other machines, and flip an election without leaving a trace.
You would hope that they didn't steal the last election, but, you know, if they did, I guess the outcome would have been completely different if we had a different president. War in Iraq probably wouldn't have happened, most likely. That's the biggest impact, I think.
This is a national security issue.
That is correct. It's a national
Why is it a
issue.
national security issue?
Of course, for the reason being that you actually decide for who are going to make the decisions for the future. I mean, everything to do with the votings are national security level issues in all the countries, not only in the US. One of the good election supervisors, his second in command, who was responsible in office for IT and security, came to me and said, I don't understand what you guys are doing. What is this big fuss about this, you know, these machines can be hacked? Of course they can be hacked. We are not counting here real things like money.
What did you say to him when he said that to you?
Well, basically I say, perhaps you should think about how much money people are using in campaigns alone. Perhaps they wouldn't be using if this wouldn't be a real thing like money.
According to a report in Rolling Stone magazine, Jack Abramoff's lobbying firm Greenberg Traurig was paid $275,000 by Diebold just before the passage of the Help America Vote Act, or HAVA, of 2002. Abramoff took the author of HAVA, Congressman Bob Ney, on a lavish golfing trip to Scotland. Both Abramoff and Ney have since been convicted of felonies relating to these matters and are currently serving time in prison. Bob Ney is a felon and currently can't vote in the state of Ohio. Yet we're stuck with his bill.
This whole mess began, our latest chapter begins with this Help America Vote Act, $3.8 billion federal act, has now put these machines out all over the map with little or no oversight.
Approximately 80% of the votes in the United States of America are counted by Diebold or ES&S.
We have to fix this. Not for the US sakes alone, while I love the United States of America, but also for the global sake, because otherwise this will just keep on spreading.
They're picking up our technology, the things that we're doing in our elections.
Actually, U.S. companies are trying to sell it very aggressively to the Europe and to a number of places where democracy hasn't been very strongly going. I mean, ES&S is selling to Hungary, ES&S is selling to England. Also, a number of the manufacturers are using different brand names when they sell their machines globally.
Isn't that at the heart of this privatization of our public election system?
I think so, and I think it's a horrible idea. I just can't understand why anyone would think that in the United States it's a good idea to let a private corporation run our elections for us in secret, using secret machines and secret software. That's insanity. We should never allow that. All votes must be on a paper ballot, and there must be complete transparency in all machines used to process or tabulate those votes.
Did you vote on paper or electronic machine?
Electronic.
What makes you think it was counted accurately?
Well, we've been doing electronic voting a lot longer in some of the other states.
Did you get a paper receipt when you voted?
No, I didn't get a receipt.
So what makes you think it was counted accurately?
Well, then I guess maybe it wasn't.
I think the last election was stolen for sure. And now there's some question of those voting machines and who is the people that own them. They're owned by, supposedly, I heard, friends of Dick Cheney.
In an infamous fundraising letter to supporters in the summer of 2003, Diebold CEO Wally Odell promised to deliver Ohio's electoral votes to George W. Bush. Friendly gesture.
To simply assume that we don't steal votes in the United States is patently absurd.
In Mahoning County, where Youngstown is located, and this is verified by the Board of Elections themselves, 20 to 30 touchscreen voting machines recorded votes for candidates opposed to those selected by the voters, always jumping from Democrat to Republican. I can think of no other way this could have happened except this, that these touchscreen machines were programmed to default to candidate Bush And if you did not override the default choice of that computer, you would be voting for Bush.
As for investigating the 2004 presidential election in Ohio, despite a court order, 56 out of 88 Ohio counties destroyed some or all of their ballots from that election.
It's like organized crime. I mean, right? Organized crime, people, when they don't understand organized crime doesn't go out and steal $1 million. What they steal is they steal a little every day. And I think that's what the Republicans understand, is that if you don't get too greedy and you steal some votes in Warren County, you steal some votes in Claremont County, you have some computer glitch problem here and there, suddenly you've got your votes. That's why you have to have checks and balances. You have to have full transparency. Right. You have to have nonpartisan people who get paid decent salaries and don't want to be fired. Look, I mean, we understand this with slot machines in Vegas. We heavily regulate them. We tear them down on the spot. We send people in with spot checks, rip the machines apart to make sure they're fair. We don't do it with our voting machines, just with our slot machines.
The key thing here is, if we want to immediately increase the level of security, you will start by releasing these absentee ballots. Because in state of California on average, in basically every county, 30% of the voters are absentees. You have a very solid evidence if the rest of the bunch doesn't fall in the same line.
You're saying release those things already right now. We're already scanning them with the optical scanners that have the image. Release those images.
And since this doesn't really need more new legislation, you're going to start doing it right now.
How would one keep this from happening? The ability to steal an election?
Non-proprietary source code.
Right.
Non-proprietary hardware, because you can hide it in the hardware. Random checks.
You'd be okay with all of that?
Sure. Because you got to have random checks. Because right now they have to wrestle over what their recount is. Well, you should have automatic recounts on, so many % of the vote just to make sure your machines are working. Because if they're not working, you don't have the right vote.
Well, you never know if the electronics or the computers are going to be doing it correctly, and if the programs are right. I guess you just have to have faith that they will be.
I think we got to make sure that all the votes are counted. I personally am committed to counting all the votes myself. I think I could do a better job than some of these machines are doing.
In my mind, silver bullet means a solution where you don't have to trust anyone. You can verify that the vote you cast was recorded accurately. You can verify that your vote was counted, and you can verify that your vote was part of the total. So you can access every single turning point, every single process point of the election process and see that my vote is going through there.
So if we have to count the paper to be absolutely sure about the machine count anyway, then what do we need the machines for in the first place?
It's a tool. It's not a god, it's a tool. Now that I'm fired, I apply for jobs, Programmer, been at NASA, worked with ExxonMobil, worked with DOT, can't find a job anywhere. I end up stocking shelves at the dollar store. So,
really?
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm thinking I'm not getting a real good recommendation from Yang and DOT.
So now you're working at the dollar store.
Working at the dollar store, stocking shelves. And Lemmy shows up.
Raymond Lemmy.
Just comes in sometime, and he's staring at me over the top of these little, potato chip type holders. I walked over and said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "No, I'm just shopping." And he leaves.
Okay.
And then he comes in again, tells me that he's been working on the case on the side.
He's looking into this on his own now?
On his own.
For fun?
I don't know.
Why? What's he going to do with this information if he's not doing it?
I guess if he gets enough of it, he thinks he can pop it somewhere. I don't know. So he keeps coming in and asking me questions about vote rigging and spies, and I don't know necessarily what he wants, so I just answer whatever he asks. This was a big case that he was making headway on. It wasn't an official case because officially DOT was going to do nothing because Feeney wouldn't let him do anything. So I give him information, but he didn't give a lot back.
Was he a friend of yours by that point?
Not really. I liked the fact that he was actually working on it.
Right.
But I didn't necessarily know how much he was working on it and how much he was working on me.
And what does he say?
He's got it all ready to bundle up. He's going to pop the news in a couple of weeks, and I'll just be thrilled with the results. And I said, you better tell somebody.
You better tell someone? Why?
These people were not nice.
Clint indicated to me that Ray Lemmy had told him that it was much bigger, that what he was investigating was much bigger and went higher.
Clint said this to you?
Yes, Clint said that to me.
When he said all the way to the top, who did you think he was? Who was the top?
I was thinking Bush. I didn't know whether it was just Jeb Bush or whether it went farther than that. From Feeney's conversations, he thought he was right with Bush.
Feeney said that he was
Yes.
right with Bush.
Right. Both George and Jeb, so.
Lemmy says to you, this corruption goes all the way to the top.
Right. And all I have to do is wait a couple weeks and I'll be thrilled with the results.
So you waited a couple weeks.
And he turned up dead in a Georgia motel room.
What he was investigating was much bigger.
When he said all the way to the top, who did you think he was?
I was thinking Bush. My first thought was they killed him.
How did you feel about that?
Guilty.
You felt guilty?
Yeah. If I hadn't brought it to him, then he wouldn't have gotten involved.
What was
They
the
don't
cause
have-
of death?
They said suicide, but they don't do autopsies in Georgia.
Did
If he died in Florida, it's an automatic autopsy.
You mean if a suicide occurred in Florida, it would be an automatic autopsy?
Automatic
But
autopsy.
A suicide in Georgia, not mandatory?
Not mandatory.
It
Right.
would have had to have occurred had he been killed in, not been killed.
Well, my speculation is he offended somebody and he got killed.
You feel he got killed?
Yes. Because the hotel he was at is this real secluded, tree lines on both sides. It's a little shabby $23 a night hotel. If you wanted to kill yourself, why not stop somewhere in Florida?
He was working out of Tallahassee, Florida.
He was
right?
working out of Tallahassee. So
you were in Tallahassee at the
Right.
time. Then there's Valdosta, which is just
Hour and a half away.
Hour and a half away. It's sort of a border town in Georgia.
Yeah, it's up a ways. There are a lot of hotels you could have stopped at Georgia prior to getting to Valdosta. The whole thing's just wrong. There's a report that he called into DOT at 6:45 in the morning, and yet they have him killing himself 38 minutes later, even though it's another hour to get to Valdosta. Supposedly he's in the motel room one night,
Right.
but there's 2 receipts.
In the police report, it says one is a check-in receipt, the other is a check-out receipt.
If he killed himself, he didn't check out.
Well, have you not checked into a motel room where they charge you up front? In other words, they check you in and check you out at the same time?
On different days? I don't think they do that.
Yeah, there's another problem with that. The first receipt is dated June 29, 2003. He was in Tallahassee June 29, 2003. He didn't kiss his wife goodbye, as she says, until June 30th, 2003, 6:15 a.m.
Who's in the room on June 29th? In the hotel room, they found a blank legal pad and an empty file folder. And
Right.
every time he'd come talk to me, he'd have his little yellow pad and his little file folder full of papers.
Are you suggesting that...
The papers are gone? Yes.
And you're suggesting that somebody took those papers?
Would you take a legal pad and a manila folder to a suicide?
Maybe he wanted to have write a suicide note.
I don't know, the note's weird too, because he didn't talk about his daughter. And the daughter was just about to be married.
He mentioned his wife.
Right.
By name. He has one child, a daughter.
Daughter.
He does not mention her.
Does not mention her. But every time we talked at the dollar store, part of the conversation was, how's your daughter? She's doing good. Getting married,
Doesn't mention her in his suicide note. Mentions his wife. Did he sign his suicide note?
Didn't sign it. He put a time on it.
The police say they took photographs, but due to a failure in the camera's flash memory, there would be no photographs.
Right.
We've recently seen that there are, in fact, photographs.
That conflict the police report.
That do conflict the police report.
The Valdosta police report alleged there was no blood on the towel and no visible trauma to the body. The photographs of Raymond Lemmy seem to suggest otherwise.
And Valdosta police have confirmed that these photographs are real, and that due to interest on the internet in December of 2004, they reopened the case of Raymond Lemmy. Also around that time, they spoke with someone at the Florida Department of Transportation, and that they closed the case shortly thereafter. Now, they won't tell me who it is they talked to at the Florida Department of Transportation. They told me over and over and over that they were not stonewalling me, and then they didn't call me back ever again. And remember, they're in Valdosta, Georgia. So what the hell does the Florida Department of Transportation have to do with an investigation that they're doing at a Georgia police department? So the fact that a call from someone at FDOT would lead to shutting down the investigation in Georgia, you know, I don't know if there's anything sinister there or not, but it sure doesn't smell right.
The time to know what really happened may have passed us by. And I am not a forensic specialist in criminology or anything else, and I would not hazard a guess.
6 weeks after Lemmy died, Tom Feeney went golfing at St. Andrews in Scotland. He was the special guest of super lobbyist Jack Abramoff.
After Lemmy turned up dead and things were not moving along very well, I went ahead and wrote a book and put it out there. I hadn't even published the book, and I get this email that it says something about, like, they know about the book, you know, don't be alone.
Are you worried about somebody taking your life?
If it's wrong, you have to do the right thing, no matter what it costs.
Aren't you just doing this to sell books? Making these outrageous claims?
No longer outrageous. Most of it's already been proven now.
Well, nonetheless,
in fact,
though,
I think you found most of the proof.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
We can't afford to fail. It's not an option. Democracy is not something we can play with. It's not a partisan game. There is nothing in our country, in our history, more sacred than freedom and democracy.
We are told in this country that vigilance is the price of freedom. Walk together, children. Don't get worried, and don't get weary.
when this story broke publicly, did the media break down your door to try to figure out what the hell was going on here?
In reference to the voting, you're the only person who may have contacted me.
CNN never called?
No.
AP?
No.
60 Minutes?
No.
Major mainstream media has not touched this affidavit story, which is at the heart of what we're looking at here.
I assume they're afraid. I mean, they did it Dan Rather. That's pretty impressive. So, how safe do you feel compared to Dan Rather?
This thing matters, and I don't care which side of the political spectrum you're on. I say frequently when I speak, this is not about left and right. This is about right and wrong.
We have become numb to unethical behavior. Our lives are very difficult. We're clinging on to our middle class by our fingernails.
We who?
The American people. When you have that 5 minutes that you can be home and close the door and have some peace, it's very, very difficult to say, look what they're doing to my vote. It's much easier to say, we have watchdogs in place that will be taking care of this for me. And I think what we don't realize is those watchdogs are not in place.
You're at the center of a very explosive story where people have died. Don't know if it was murder. Don't know if it was suicide. Dogs have died. Don't know if it was murder.
Probably wasn't suicide.
If it wasn't suicide. That's not funny.
Yeah.
I've never had this feeling before that there's no place to turn. Normally you had the media. You'd go to the press. The press would become furious, at least parts of it, enough of it. Or you go to your congressman. But nobody seems to care.
We put this affidavit out in December.
Of 2004.
You seen it on ABC yet?
I have not seen it on ABC.
If you think that we're going to get any
use from the corporate media, I think that you're sadly mistaken. So I'm saying go around it. There is so much that we can do if we begin to act like we, the people, actually have power, exercising it. And guess what? You act like you have power, and the next thing you know, I'll be damned, you've got it.
What do we say to our ancestors who gave their lives for this right to vote? We're sorry. Remember the words of Benjamin Franklin when he left the Constitutional Convention at Independence Hall, and he was asked, what sort of government have you given us? And he said, a republic, if you can keep it. We have not kept it. We have not kept the flame, and we need to take this country back.
Well, I don't know how much one vote counts, but collectively, I guess if we all lose faith, then, might as well go to the Iraq during the Saddam era, have unanimous elections, or have North Korean democracy where it's like basically unanimous and you get killed if you don't vote for whoever they want you to vote for. I mean, if our votes don't count, why bother voting?
I think everybody should vote. If you don't speak your piece, then nothing's going to get done.
Well, it's a democracy and everything needs to be counted correctly, and that's why one of the reasons why we live here.
We're supposedly a country that is based upon democracy, and that's why we go out and try to export it and bomb it into other people, this notion of democracy. But it's important to us because we do claim and assert ourselves to be a democratic country that it actually exemplifies democracy.
I think the proof is kind of in the pudding. When I see things start to change for the betterment of the people, rather than policies that seem to benefit corporations and the wealthy, when I actually start to see things and government enact policies that actually help everyday people, then I'll believe that voting is working.
In his continuing effort to demand accountability and to publicize his story, Clint Curtis ran for Congress against Tom Feeney in 2006. Feeney refused to debate Curtis and outspent him by a factor of 26-1. Theirs was one of 4 congressional races in Florida that were contested in 2006, prompting Florida's new Republican governor and the Republican legislature to mandate that they would vote on paper ballots in the 2008 election, where Curtis will run again against Tom Feeney. Mavis Georgalis spent years in the courts fighting both the Yangs and FDOT. Ultimately, she was reinstated with full back pay and awarded a large settlement from the Florida Department of Transportation. In August 2007, Diebold changed its name to Premier Election Solutions, Inc.
I think what Clint Curtis is really an object lesson in what can go wrong and how easily it can go wrong. In fact, we don't know if his software and his code was ever used in any voting software. But the fact that we're not able to look at the software that is used to count our votes, this secret software that is used to count votes in America, the world's greatest democracy, is frankly a scandal. And we all should be very concerned about that.
Take this information, do